December 8, 1944, 1600 hours. The frozen approaches to Bastogne, Belgium. Oberscharführer Heinrich Müller pressed his eye against the Tiger's periscope, scanning the snow-covered ridgeline 400 meters ahead. 3 Shermans had appeared from behind a destroyed farmhouse, their olive-drab hulls stark against the white landscape. Müller allowed himself a brief smile. At this range, his 88mm KWK-36 gun could punch through a Sherman's frontal armor with contemptuous ease, while their 76mm guns posed no serious threat to his Tiger's 100mm thick frontal plate. He had destroyed 11 American tanks in the past 3 weeks, each engagement following the same pattern. The Americans would spot his Tiger, fire ineffectively, then either retreat or die. The mathematics of armored warfare had been written in his favor since August 1942, when Tigers first rolled into combat at Leningrad. What Müller didn't know, what German intelligence had failed to discover, what would shatter the foundation of Tiger invulnerability in exactly 47 seconds, was that the lead Sherman's ammunition rack contained 6 rounds that would rewrite every assumption about American anti-tank capability. 6 M93 high-velocity armor-piercing rounds, each containing a tungsten carbide core capable of penetrating armor that German tankers believed was essentially immune to frontal attack. The Sherman's gunner, Staff Sergeant James Morrison of the 744th Tank Battalion, had been briefed on these special rounds just 2 days earlier. Use them against Tigers and Panthers only, his platoon leader had emphasized. They're too valuable to waste on Panzer Fours. At 400 meters, Morrison centered his crosshairs on the Tiger's turret front, the most vulnerable point on an otherwise impenetrable fortress. He squeezed the trigger. The tungsten carbide penetrator, traveling at over 1,000 meters per second, struck the Tiger's 120mm thick turret face at an angle that would have caused standard American ammunition to ricochet harmlessly. Instead, the ultra-dense core concentrated tremendous kinetic energy into a projectile smaller than the gun's 76mm bore. The round punched through the cast steel armor, continued through the turret interior, and detonated the ready ammunition stored beside the breech. Müller had no time to process what happened. The Tiger's turret exploded from internal pressure, killing the entire crew instantly. The 2 supporting Tigers, positioned 300 meters behind Müller's vehicle, immediately reversed into defensive positions. Their commanders had just witnessed something that violated everything they understood about armored combat. A Sherman had destroyed a Tiger with a frontal turret hit at 400 meters. According to every intelligence briefing, every training manual, every combat report from 3 years of warfare, this was impossible. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The story of how American tungsten carbide ammunition transformed the Tiger from an invulnerable predator into a vulnerable target begins not on the frozen Belgian battlefields, but in the testing facilities and industrial complexes of the United States, where metallurgists worked against impossible deadlines to solve a problem that threatened to undermine American armored operations across 2 theaters of war. In early 1944, the United States Army faced a crisis that military planners had systematically underestimated. The Tiger tank, Germany's heavy armored fortress, combined a powerful 88mm high-velocity gun with armor protection that rendered it essentially immune to standard American tank weapons at combat ranges. The Tiger I's frontal hull armor measured 100mm thick, positioned at a 12-degree slope that increased effective thickness to approximately 106mm. The turret front, constructed of curved cast steel, measured 120mm at its thickest point on later models, up from 100mm on early variants. This armor protection, combined with the Tiger's devastating 88mm KWK-36 gun, created a weapon system that American tank crews had learned to fear with justifiable terror. American intelligence had catastrophically miscalculated both the quantity and capabilities of Tigers that would be deployed. Initial estimates suggested Germany would produce perhaps 200 Tigers total, deployed primarily on the Eastern Front against Soviet forces. Reality proved far grimmer. By December 1944, Germany had produced over 1,300 Tiger I tanks, with significant numbers deployed in both the Eastern and Western theaters. The psychological impact on American tank crews was severe and well documented. The 75mm M3 gun that armed most Shermans in Europe could not penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor at any practical combat range. Testing conducted at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland demonstrated that the 75mm M61 armor-piercing capped round could only penetrate 100mm of armor at 0 degrees obliquity from approximately 100 meters. Against the Tiger's sloped frontal hull and curved turret, penetration required point-blank range, typically under 50 meters, a distance at which the Tiger's 88mm gun made engagement suicidal. The Tiger could reliably destroy Shermans from ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, while Shermans needed to close to knife-fighting distance for any hope of penetration. Even the improved 76mm M1 gun, which began reaching European units in July 1944, struggled desperately against Tiger armor. Using standard M62 armor-piercing capped rounds, the 76mm could penetrate 109mm of vertical armor at 1,000 meters. This proved sufficient against Panzer IV tanks and most German assault guns, but the Tiger's turret and hull remained effectively immune except at extremely close ranges or against side and rear armor. The problem was not the guns themselves, but the ammunition they fired. Standard armor-piercing ammunition consisted of hardened steel projectiles that relied on kinetic energy to punch through armor plate. Against increasingly thick German armor, these conventional rounds reached the limits of physics. Increasing projectile velocity required larger guns and more powerful propellant charges, creating a spiral of escalating weapon size that tank designers struggled to accommodate. The solution lay in material science and specialized ammunition design that would concentrate maximum kinetic energy into smaller, denser penetrators. By mid-1944, American ordnance engineers had developed the T4 round, later standardized as the M93 HVAP, representing a fundamental departure from conventional armor-piercing design philosophy. The projectile consisted of a tungsten carbide core, one of the hardest and densest materials available to Allied industry, surrounded by a lightweight aluminum body and protective ballistic cap. This composite design concentrated the projectile's kinetic energy into a subcaliber penetrator significantly smaller than the gun's 76mm bore diameter, while the lightweight carrier body reduced overall projectile weight. The result transformed the 76mm gun's anti-armor capability dramatically. The M93 round achieved a muzzle velocity of 1,036 meters per second, compared to 792 meters per second for the standard M62 round. This 244 meters per second velocity increase translated directly into penetrating power through the physics of kinetic energy. At 1,000 yards, approximately 914 meters, the HVAP round could penetrate 160 millimeters of armor at 10 degrees obliquity according to official War Department testing data. Against the Tiger's turret face, with its curved 120mm thick cast steel, this meant reliable penetration at ranges up to 1,000 meters, compared to the point-blank distances required with standard ammunition. More critically for Tiger crews, the HVAP round could penetrate the Tiger's 100mm thick frontal hull armor at ranges approaching 800 meters under favorable impact angles. The invulnerability that Tiger crews had relied upon since 1942 was suddenly shockingly vulnerable to American tank fire at combat ranges. But developing HVAP represented only half the solution. Production was an entirely separate crisis. The T4 round depended on tungsten carbide, a strategic material that existed in critically limited global supply. China produced approximately 36% of global tungsten supply before the war, but this had to serve all Allied needs across countless applications. Tungsten was essential for machine tools that cut hardened steel, armor-piercing ammunition for multiple calibers from aircraft cannons to naval guns, armor plate hardening processes, and numerous industrial processes critical to war production. American tungsten demand for HVAP ammunition alone consumed hundreds of metric tons annually. Each 76mm HVAP round contained approximately 0.88 kilograms of tungsten carbide, meaning a Sherman carrying 6 rounds required nearly 5.3 kilograms of this desperately scarce material. China produced approximately 10,000 metric tons of tungsten concentrates in 1944, but this supply had to serve all Allied needs across all applications and all theaters. The United States supplemented Chinese imports with domestic production from limited deposits in Colorado, Nevada, and California, but total availability remained severely constrained throughout the war. Germany's tungsten position was catastrophically worse than Allied supply. Swedish imports, which had provided most German tungsten in the early war years, declined sharply as Allied diplomatic and economic pressure intensified, and as the war turned decisively against the Reich. German domestic production remained minimal. By 1945, German factories desperately hoarded tungsten for machine tools needed for aircraft engine production, while tank crews received only standard ammunition despite German engineers having developed similar tungsten-cored projectiles. The United States Ordnance Department had been testing HVAP projectiles since spring 1942, but production at meaningful scale did not begin until after the Normandy landings revealed the full extent of German armor superiority. In July 1944, production of 3-inch HVAP rounds for tank destroyers reached 1,000 rounds. August saw 1,000 rounds of 76mm HVAP produced. September yielded another 1,076mm rounds. Not until November 1944 did monthly production reach 5,000 rounds for the 76mm gun, ramping to 7,000 rounds per month by January 1945. By March 1945, approximately 33,000 rounds of 76mm HVAP ammunition had been produced, representing a significant industrial effort, but still a tiny fraction of total ammunition expenditure. By February 1945, the average 76mm Sherman in Europe had received a total of 5 HVAP rounds. 5 rounds to face an enemy deploying Tigers as elite heavy breakthrough weapons and Panthers as standard medium tanks in panzer divisions. A Sherman company with 17 tanks would possess 85 HVAP rounds total, while facing German units that might field multiple Tigers and dozens of Panthers. The scarcity created impossible tactical dilemmas for American commanders at every level. The first HVAP rounds reached the European theater in August 1944, but their arrival was overshadowed by broader tactical problems facing American armored forces. Sherman crews had learned through bitter experience that engaging Tigers frontally was suicide with standard ammunition. Doctrine emphasized calling for artillery support, airstrikes, or specialized tank destroyers when Tigers appeared. Sherman crews were taught to avoid direct engagement, to maneuver for flank shots, to use terrain and concealment. This defensive mindset, while tactically sound given ammunition limitations, ceded psychological initiative to German heavy tank crews who operated with supreme confidence in their invulnerability. The arrival of HVAP rounds began changing this calculus, but slowly, hampered by the ammunition's extreme scarcity and lack of comprehensive training on its capabilities and critical limitations. The psychological impact on American tank crews before HVAP availability was severe and well documented in after-action reports and veteran testimony. Crews nicknamed the Sherman various derogatory names, with Ronson lighter being among the most common, claiming it lit on fire every time. While post-war statistical analysis demonstrated this reputation was significantly exaggerated, the perception shaped battlefield behavior profoundly. Tank commanders who spotted Tigers often chose to withdraw and call for support rather than engage directly, ceding tactical initiative to an enemy who could be defeated with proper ammunition and tactics. The fear was not irrational. Tigers had earned their fearsome reputation through devastating combat performance. At Villers-Bocage in Normandy on June 13, 1944, SS Oberscharführer Michael Wittmann's single Tiger destroyed 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 15 other vehicles in less than 15 minutes, temporarily stopping an entire British armored advance. Though Wittmann himself died in combat in August 1944, months before HVAP became widely available, such demonstrations of Tiger capability created lasting psychological trauma among Allied tank crews. The first widespread combat testing of HVAP ammunition against Tigers came during the desperate December 1944 fighting around Bastogne, Belgium, where German forces launched their massive Ardennes offensive aimed at splitting Allied armies and capturing the vital port of Antwerp. The German plan, conceived by Adolf Hitler personally against the advice of his professional military staff, concentrated 28 divisions including elite Waffen-SS panzer divisions equipped with Tigers, King Tigers, and Panthers for a surprise winter offensive through the lightly defended Ardennes forest. The attacking force included substantial numbers of Tiger tanks deployed in independent heavy tank battalions supporting panzer divisions. Schwer Panzerabteilung 501 alone fielded 45 King Tigers, the even more formidable successor to the Tiger I, while other heavy tank battalions contributed dozens of Tiger I tanks to the offensive. American forces, caught completely by surprise on December 16, struggled desperately to establish defensive positions and delay German advances until reinforcements could arrive. The 101st Airborne Division, rushed to Bastogne to hold the critical road junction, found itself surrounded by German forces on December 20. The encircled American defenders included elements of the 10th Armored Division's Combat Command B, which possessed Sherman tanks equipped with 76mm guns and small quantities of HVAP ammunition. The stage was set for the first major test of whether American tungsten carbide rounds could transform Sherman tanks from vulnerable targets into genuine threats against Germany's heaviest armor. December 22, 1944. 0800 hours. The approaches to Bastogne. Lieutenant Klaus Weber commanded a Tiger I from Schwer Panzerabteilung 301, part of the forces besieging the surrounded American garrison. Weber was a veteran of 2 years Eastern Front combat, with 37 confirmed tank kills painted on his Tiger's gun barrel. He had faced Soviet T-34s, KV-1s, and the newer IS-2 Stalin tanks. None had seriously threatened his Tiger frontally. American Shermans, he believed, posed even less danger than Soviet armor. As Weber's Tiger emerged from morning fog, 3 Shermans from the 10th Armored Division's Combat Command B opened fire from concealed positions 600 meters away. The first 2 rounds, standard M62 armor-piercing, struck Weber's frontal hull and ricocheted harmlessly, exactly as expected. Weber smiled. The Americans were panicking, wasting ammunition against armor they couldn't penetrate. He ordered his gunner to engage the leftmost Sherman. Before his gunner could fire, the 3rd American round struck Weber's turret front. The Tiger shuddered violently as the tungsten carbide core punched through the 120mm armor. The penetration created a jet of molten metal and armor fragments that swept through the turret interior, killing Weber's loader instantly and severely wounding the gunner. Weber, shocked but still conscious, ordered immediate retreat. His driver reversed the Tiger into cover while Weber processed what had just occurred. A Sherman had penetrated his turret frontally at 600 meters. This was supposed to be impossible. Weber's experience repeated across the Bastogne perimeter over the next several days as American tankers learned to employ HVAP rounds effectively. Tank destroyers of the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with 3-inch guns and HVAP ammunition, proved devastatingly effective against Tigers attempting to break through American defensive positions. On December 23, Sergeant Philip Moresco's M10 tank destroyer destroyed a Tiger at 900 meters with a single HVAP round that penetrated the turret face, causing a catastrophic ammunition explosion. The Tiger's entire turret was blown 15 meters from the hull by the force of the internal detonation. German tank crews began reporting encounters with American tanks and tank destroyers possessing new, far more powerful ammunition. The reports reaching German headquarters were confused and contradictory. Some crews claimed Americans had secretly deployed super-heavy tank destroyers with 105mm guns. Others suggested British 17-pounder armed Firefly tanks had been transferred to American units in significant numbers. The truth that American industry had developed specialized tungsten carbide ammunition that could penetrate Tiger armor at combat ranges was more troubling to German intelligence officers than any of these theories. It meant American industrial capacity could respond to tactical problems and field solutions faster than German industry could develop counters. More fundamentally, it meant the Tiger's psychological advantage, its aura of invulnerability that had sustained crew morale and aggressive tactics, was suddenly and permanently shattered. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The German perspective on encountering HVAP-equipped American tanks was one of profound shock and bitter recrimination. Tiger crews had operated for over 2 years under the assumption of essentially complete frontal invulnerability against American armor. This assumption shaped every tactical decision, every engagement, every crew's psychological approach to combat. Tigers advanced boldly, positioned themselves in exposed locations, and engaged American tanks with contemptuous confidence, because they knew Sherman guns couldn't hurt them frontally. The arrival of HVAP ammunition destroyed this psychological foundation. Suddenly, Tigers needed to employ the same cautious tactics they had previously reserved for confronting specialized tank destroyers or when caught from the flank. German after-action reports from the Ardennes offensive struggled to explain Tiger losses that should not have occurred. Technical superiority of the Tiger over the Sherman remained undeniable on paper. The Tiger's 88mm gun could destroy Shermans at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The Tiger's armor protection exceeded Sherman capabilities by wide margins. Yet Tigers were being destroyed by frontal hits from Sherman guns at ranges where penetration should have been impossible with standard American ammunition. German intelligence officers examining destroyed Tigers found evidence that confirmed their worst fears. Entry holes significantly smaller than 76mm diameter suggested subcaliber projectiles. Metallurgical analysis of undetonated rounds recovered near disabled tanks revealed tungsten carbide cores. The Americans had deployed tungsten-cored ammunition in quantities sufficient to distribute to frontline tank units. This discovery carried profound strategic implications. Germany itself had developed similar ammunition, the Panzergranate 40 series using tungsten cores to improve penetration of German anti-tank guns. But German tungsten supplies were critically limited by late 1944. Production focused desperately on machine tools rather than ammunition. If Americans could field specialized tungsten carbide ammunition in sufficient quantities to distribute even 5 or 6 rounds per tank, it demonstrated industrial capacity and resource access that Germany absolutely could not match. Not only were American tanks more numerous and better supported logistically, they were now equipped with ammunition that eliminated Germany's carefully engineered armor protection advantages. The psychological impact spread rapidly through German heavy tank battalions. Tiger crews who survived encounters with HVAP-armed American tanks carried that knowledge back to their units, describing how Sherman rounds had punched through armor that was supposed to be immune to frontal attack. The fighting around Bastogne continued through late December and into early January 1945, providing extensive combat data on HVAP effectiveness against German heavy armor. American tank crews learned critical lessons about the ammunition's capabilities and equally important limitations through brutal trial and error under combat conditions. The tungsten carbide core, while excellent at penetrating armor when impact conditions were favorable, possessed inherent brittleness that created significant performance limitations. Below certain impact velocities, approximately 700 meters per second at the point of impact, the tungsten core could shatter on contact rather than penetrating. This meant HVAP effectiveness declined substantially at longer ranges where projectile velocity had decreased through air resistance. Against Tiger I turret armor, effective range was approximately 1,000 meters. Beyond this distance, the probability of core fragmentation on impact increased dramatically, resulting in non-penetrating hits that merely alerted the Tiger crew to the threat. American tankers learned these limitations through combat experience, sometimes with tragic consequences. Lieutenant Robert Henderson's Sherman engaged a Tiger at approximately 1,200 meters on December 27, 1944, expending 3 precious HVAP rounds. All 3 rounds struck the Tiger's turret but failed to penetrate, the tungsten cores shattering against the thick cast steel. The Tiger's return fire destroyed Henderson's Sherman with a single shot, killing the entire crew. The engagement demonstrated that HVAP was not a magical solution to Tiger superiority. Proper tactics, careful range estimation, favorable impact angles, and judicious ammunition conservation remained absolutely critical factors. HVAP gave American tankers significantly better odds against Tigers, but success still required exceptional skill, tactical judgment, and often considerable luck. Training on proper HVAP employment remained woefully inadequate throughout the war. The ammunition arrived at frontline units faster than training materials could be developed and distributed. Many crews learned effective employment techniques through combat experience rather than formal instruction, paying for their education with their lives. The technical limitations extended beyond velocity thresholds. HVAP effectiveness varied dramatically based on impact angle against sloped armor. The Tiger I's frontal hull, while only 100 millimeters thick, was positioned at a 12-degree slope that increased effective thickness and created oblique impact angles. When HVAP rounds struck this sloped armor at shallow angles, they frequently ricocheted or shattered rather than penetrating. Sherman crews learned to target the Tiger's turret face, which presented a more favorable curved surface, or to wait for side shots against the Tiger's 80mm thick vertical hull armor that HVAP could reliably penetrate at combat ranges. The tactical implications were significant. Sherman crews still needed to maneuver carefully, use terrain effectively, and create favorable engagement angles. HVAP didn't make Shermans equal to Tigers in direct frontal engagements, but it gave American crews a fighting chance when positioned advantageously. Sergeant Thomas Baker's documented experience on January 5, 1945, illustrated both the potential and frustrating limitations of HVAP in actual combat. His Sherman, part of the 4th Armored Division's relief column breaking through to Bastogne, engaged a Tiger I at approximately 700 meters. Baker's gunner fired 4 HVAP rounds in rapid succession. 3 struck the Tiger's frontal hull armor and ricocheted harmlessly despite being well within theoretical penetration range. The 4th round struck the junction between turret and hull, a structural weak point, and achieved penetration. The Tiger crew bailed out immediately as fire spread through the engine compartment. Baker's experience demonstrated that even within effective range, HVAP required precise shot placement. Hitting armor wasn't enough. Crews needed to hit vulnerable points where armor thickness, curvature, and angle combined to allow penetration. This level of precision demanded exceptional gunnery skills that not all Sherman crews possessed. By late January 1945, as the Ardennes offensive collapsed and German forces retreated back toward the Rhine River, American intelligence had compiled extensive data on HVAP combat performance. The ammunition proved highly effective against Tiger turrets at ranges up to 1,000 meters when hits were achieved on the turret face or gun mantlet. Against the frontal hull, results were inconsistent except at ranges below 600 meters and favorable impact angles approaching perpendicular. Side armor penetration was reliable at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, but achieving side shots required tactical maneuverability that wasn't always possible in defensive engagements. The overall assessment concluded that HVAP meaningfully improved Sherman capabilities against Tigers, but didn't eliminate the Tiger's fundamental advantages in armor protection and firepower. Tiger crews who fought intelligently, using terrain and concealment, maintaining engagement ranges beyond 800 meters, and keeping frontal armor toward threats, remained formidable opponents even against HVAP-equipped Shermans. The psychological impact on German Tiger crews, however, extended far beyond the ammunition's actual technical performance. For over 2 years, Tiger crews had fought with absolute confidence in their frontal invulnerability against American tanks. This psychological security was as important as the physical armor protection. It allowed aggressive tactics, bold positioning, and the confident mindset essential for effective combat performance. HVAP shattered this psychological foundation even when individual engagements didn't result in Tiger losses. The mere knowledge that Sherman guns could now penetrate Tiger armor frontally under favorable circumstances forced German crews to approach every engagement with uncertainty and caution. Should they advance boldly as doctrine and previous experience suggested, or adopt defensive tactics assuming American tanks possessed HVAP? The uncertainty paralyzed decision-making and slowed tactical responses. German crews began reporting seeing HVAP-equipped Shermans even when facing standard 75mm armed tanks. The psychological trauma created by a few HVAP encounters spread far beyond actual ammunition distribution. The broader strategic context of early 1945 magnified the psychological impact of HVAP on German armored forces. By February, the strategic situation had become hopeless for Germany. Soviet armies were advancing rapidly from the east, having shattered German defensive lines in massive winter offensives that pushed toward Berlin. American and British forces were preparing to cross the Rhine River and drive into Germany's industrial heartland. Germany's fuel situation had become catastrophic, with synthetic fuel production collapsing under sustained Allied strategic bombing. Tiger units frequently abandoned operational tanks not because of combat damage but because they had no fuel to operate them. Crews who might have maintained fighting spirit despite overwhelming odds found their morale shattered by the combination of strategic hopelessness and the loss of their one remaining advantage, technological superiority in armored warfare. German tank ace Otto Carius, who commanded Tigers and later Jagdtigers and survived the war to write detailed memoirs, described the psychological impact of losing armor invulnerability. The sense of security that thick frontal armor provided was crucial to crew morale and aggressive tactics, Carius wrote in his post-war memoir Tigers in the Mud. When that sense eroded because enemy guns could now penetrate what was supposed to be immune, crew performance suffered measurably. Tiger crews facing HVAP-equipped American tanks experienced exactly this erosion of confidence. The turret face became a known vulnerability that competent American crews could exploit at combat ranges. This knowledge made Tiger crews demonstrably more cautious, slower to engage, and generally less willing to take tactical risks that had previously been routine. The psychological shift had direct tactical consequences. Cautious crews fought defensively rather than aggressively. Defensive tactics ceded initiative to American forces who could employ combined arms coordination that negated German armor advantages. The production and allocation of HVAP ammunition throughout early 1945 revealed the enormous gap between American and German industrial capacity. While American factories ramped up HVAP production to 7,000 rounds per month by January 1945, German tungsten ammunition production had essentially ceased. German factories desperately hoarded tungsten for machine tools needed for aircraft engine production rather than ammunition. German tank crews fought the war's final months with ammunition designs dating to 1942 and 1943 while American ammunition technology continued improving. The disparity extended beyond tungsten ammunition. American factories produced everything in overwhelming quantities. Spare parts, replacement tanks, ammunition of all types, fuel, food. Everything an army needed arrived in quantities that German forces couldn't match even at their peak production in 1943 and 1944. By March 1945, as American forces crossed the Rhine and drove deep into Germany, Tiger crews found themselves in impossible tactical situations. They possessed superior individual vehicles but operated without fuel, without air cover, without adequate artillery support, and now without the psychological advantage of armor invulnerability. The mathematics of armored warfare had shifted decisively. A single Tiger might still possess technical superiority over individual Shermans, but American forces deployed Shermans in overwhelming numbers, supported by devastating artillery, complete air superiority, and unlimited logistics. When Tigers encountered these combined forces, technical superiority meant little. Tigers advancing without adequate support were destroyed piecemeal despite superior capabilities. The HVAP ammunition didn't make Sherman's technical equals to Tigers, but it removed the psychological paralysis that had affected American tank crews during earlier fighting. Crews now knew they could hurt Tigers frontally under favorable circumstances. This knowledge transformed tactical behavior dramatically. The Korean War, beginning in June 1950, provided another extensive combat test of HVAP effectiveness under different circumstances. American Sherman tanks, primarily the M4A3E8 variant armed with 76mm guns, faced Soviet-built T-34-85 tanks in North Korean and later Chinese service. Unlike the European theater where HVAP had been critically scarce, by 1950 tungsten supplies were no longer constrained by competing wartime demands and substantial stocks of HVAP ammunition were readily available. American tank crews in Korea found that HVAP rounds easily penetrated T-34-85 armor at normal combat ranges. The T-34-85, while a capable medium tank, possessed armor protection significantly inferior to German Tigers. Its 90mm thick turret front and 45mm thick glacis plate could not resist tungsten carbide projectiles fired at high velocity from 76mm guns. American Shermans in Korea achieved remarkably favorable exchange ratios against communist armor, due partly to superior crew training but significantly to plentiful HVAP availability. The vindication of the 76mm Sherman in Korea was bittersweet for European theater veterans. The ammunition that could have been more widely employed in Europe proved devastatingly effective in Asia when supply constraints no longer limited employment. The German perspective on American HVAP ammunition, gathered from post-war interrogations and examination of captured documents, revealed grudging professional respect mixed with deep frustration. German ordnance officers recognized that American industry had solved the tungsten core ammunition problem more successfully than German manufacturers despite Germany having pioneered the underlying technology with the Panzergranate 40 series. German production of tungsten-cored ammunition, severely limited by material scarcity, never approached American HVAP output even at peak. American production of HVAP, though also constrained by tungsten scarcity, still substantially exceeded German capability by late 1944. This production disparity reflected broader industrial capacity differences that proved strategically decisive. German tank crews interviewed extensively after the war frequently mentioned American ammunition improvements as a significant factor that complicated their tactical situation. The knowledge that Sherman tanks could penetrate Tiger turrets at combat ranges meant German crews could no longer rely simply on frontal armor for protection. This forced more cautious tactics, slower advances, and greater reliance on defensive positions. But defensive warfare ceded initiative to American forces, allowing employment of combined arms tactics that negated German advantages. The psychological impact of losing armor invulnerability contributed substantially to the increasingly defensive mindset that characterized German armored operations in 1945. Technical analysis of HVAP projectiles recovered from German tank wrecks provided German engineers with detailed understanding of American ammunition design. The tungsten carbide core surrounded by lightweight aluminum body represented efficient use of scarce strategic materials that maximized penetrating power while minimizing tungsten consumption per round. The lightweight carrier body allowed higher velocities without excessive gun barrel wear, while the dense tungsten core retained kinetic energy over distance far better than steel penetrators. German engineers recognized these design advantages but lacked the industrial capacity and material resources to respond with similar developments. By late 1944, German tank and ammunition production focused entirely on maintaining output of existing designs rather than developing new ammunition types. The Tiger's KWK 36 88mm gun already possessed excellent penetrating power with standard ammunition against all Allied tanks, so developing improved German rounds was not the critical priority that it was for American forces facing superior German armor. Developing new ammunition would require tungsten. Germany could not spare, and retooling that factories struggling under continuous air attack could not accommodate. The Battle of the Bulge's historical significance extended far beyond immediate tactical results. The Ardennes offensive represented Germany's last major attack in the West, consuming irreplaceable reserves of fuel, ammunition, and experienced crews in a desperate gamble that failed to achieve strategic objectives. The engagement proved conclusively that German tactical methods relying heavily on superior individual weapon performance could not overcome American operational advantages in combined arms coordination, superior logistics, and overwhelming material superiority. German commanders had designed their Ardennes offensive around Tiger and King Tiger capabilities, assuming armor and firepower would compensate for fuel shortages and limited air support. This assumption proved catastrophically false when American forces, initially surprised and pushed back, recovered and counterattacked with devastating effectiveness. The lesson was clear to military observers on both sides. Technical excellence in weapons design mattered and provided tactical advantages, but operational excellence in combined arms warfare, superior logistics, and better crew training mattered more for achieving strategic success. The impact of HVAP on individual American tank crews deserves consideration beyond purely technical analysis. For tankers who had faced Tigers with only standard ammunition during the difficult Normandy and subsequent fighting, the arrival of HVAP represented tangible hope. The ammunition didn't eliminate the Tiger threat entirely, but provided a tool that offered reasonable chances of achieving penetration under favorable circumstances. This psychological boost contributed measurably to improved performance and more aggressive tactics. American tank crews who knew they possessed HVAP fought with greater confidence, took calculated tactical risks, and engaged German heavy armor more willingly than crews limited to standard ammunition. For German Tiger crews, the knowledge that American tanks now posed a credible frontal threat fundamentally altered tactical calculations in ways that extended beyond individual engagements. The sense of invulnerability that thick armor provided was crucial to aggressive tactics and crew morale. When that sense eroded, crew performance suffered measurably. Tiger crews facing HVAP-equipped opponents became demonstrably more cautious, less willing to advance boldly, and generally adopted defensive mindsets that ceded tactical initiative to American forces who exploited this hesitation ruthlessly. The strategic implications of HVAP development extend to broader questions about technological competition in modern warfare and the crucial importance of industrial capacity over pure technical sophistication. Both American and German research establishments possessed competent engineers and sophisticated understanding of ballistics, metallurgy, and armor penetration physics. Both recognized the value of tungsten-cored ammunition early in the war. Both developed functional designs that worked effectively in testing. The critical difference came down to industrial capacity and resource availability rather than scientific knowledge or engineering skill. American industry could produce HVAP in quantities sufficient to influence battlefield outcomes meaningfully, distributing thousands of rounds monthly to frontline units despite never producing enough to fully equip all tanks. German industry could barely produce enough tungsten ammunition to conduct limited testing and evaluation. This pattern repeated across numerous weapon systems throughout the war. Germany developed sophisticated and often technically superior weapons, but could not produce them in quantities that affected strategic outcomes decisively. American industrial capacity produced less sophisticated but highly effective equipment in overwhelming numbers that proved strategically decisive. The M4 Sherman was objectively not the best tank of World War II by most technical measures of armor protection, firepower, or crew protection. But American factories produced approximately 49,324 Shermans compared to approximately 1,347 Tiger I tanks Germany produced. This 37-to-1 production ratio, combined with ammunition improvements like HVAP that reduced the technical performance gap, proved strategically decisive. Germany could not replace Tiger losses at anything approaching American Sherman replacement rates. Every Tiger destroyed represented an irreplaceable loss of a sophisticated weapon system requiring thousands of man-hours to produce. Every Sherman destroyed could be replaced within days from the constant stream of replacement vehicles arriving from American factories. The post-war careers of veterans who fought in HVAP-equipped tanks or against them reflect the enduring impact of these combat experiences on military thinking and doctrine development. General Creighton Abrams, who commanded tank battalions during the European campaign with distinction, rose to become United States Army Chief of Staff and gave his name to the M1 Abrams main battle tank that entered service in 1980. The lessons Abrams learned about combined arms warfare, the critical importance of crew training, and the necessity of adequate ammunition influenced his entire career and the doctrine he helped develop for American armored forces. The M1 Abrams was deliberately designed with a powerful 120mm smoothbore gun and sophisticated ammunition types including depleted uranium penetrators that serve functionally the same role HVAP served in World War II, concentrating maximum kinetic energy into dense subcaliber projectiles. German veterans of Tiger units who survived the war and later joined the West German Bundeswehr brought different but equally important lessons from their experiences. They had personally experienced the limitations of possessing technological superiority without the industrial base and logistics to support it effectively. Bundeswehr armor doctrine during the Cold War emphasized quality and training while explicitly recognizing that West Germany could not match Soviet numerical superiority in tanks. But Bundeswehr planners, informed directly by wartime experience, also emphasized ammunition effectiveness as critically important. The Leopard 1 and later Leopard 2 main battle tanks used sophisticated ammunition designs informed by the painful realization that ammunition technology mattered as much as armor thickness for combat effectiveness. The conclusion of World War II in Europe, marked by Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945, ended the immediate tactical need for HVAP ammunition against Tigers. American ordnance officers systematically examining destroyed vehicles across Germany found clear evidence of HVAP penetrations on numerous Tiger wrecks, confirming the ammunition's effectiveness under favorable conditions while documenting its limitations. Tigers hit by HVAP typically showed penetrations through the mantlet or turret face when struck at favorable angles and ranges, but rarely through the glacis plate which remained highly resistant to frontal attack. This pattern validated American tactical doctrine that emphasized flanking maneuvers and creating favorable engagement angles rather than relying solely on superior ammunition. The comprehensive post-war analysis concluded that while HVAP meaningfully improved Sherman capabilities against German heavy armor, the truly decisive factors remained overwhelming numerical superiority, vastly superior logistics, complete air superiority after early 1944, devastating artillery support, and more effective operational doctrine emphasizing combined arms coordination. The transformation of American tank crews from mid-1944 to early 1945 reflected the cumulative impact of combat experience, improved equipment availability, and familiarity with specialized ammunition including HVAP. Crews that landed in Normandy in June 1944 often felt genuinely apprehensive about facing German armor, particularly Tigers and King Tigers. By early 1945, after months of sustained combat, significant training improvements, increased availability of 76mm Shermans, and growing familiarity with HVAP ammunition capabilities, American tankers approached engagements far more confidently. This psychological shift had direct tactical consequences that influenced every subsequent engagement. Confident crews fought more aggressively, took calculated risks when opportunities appeared, and exploited tactical advantages rather than adopting purely defensive mindsets. While HVAP ammunition alone did not create this transformation, its availability and proven effectiveness contributed meaningfully to improved American armored force morale and tactical performance throughout the war's final months. The legacy of HVAP development continues influencing modern ammunition design in ways that demonstrate the enduring relevance of lessons learned during World War II. American armor doctrine from 1945 onward consistently emphasized ammunition effectiveness as a critical component of tank design equal to armor protection and mobility. Modern tank ammunition uses depleted uranium or tungsten alloy penetrators, materials chosen for essentially the same density and hardness properties that made tungsten carbide effective in 1944. The underlying physics principle remains constant across 8 decades. Concentrate maximum kinetic energy into the smallest possible, extremely dense projectile moving at the highest achievable velocity. The continuity from 1944 HVAP to present-day armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding sabot ammunition illustrates how foundational lessons from World War II continue directly influencing military technology development. Soviet and later Russian tank ammunition development followed remarkably similar paths, independently recognizing that armor-piercing capability depends heavily on projectile material properties and kinetic energy delivery. The global tank ammunition industry traces its technological roots directly to the HVAP experience, where engineers first demonstrated conclusively that specialized ammunition could partially overcome armor protection advantages. December 8, 1944, when Heinrich Müller's Tiger crew first experienced HVAP penetration of their supposedly invulnerable armor near Bastogne, marked a genuine turning point in the psychological balance of armored warfare on the Western Front. German Tiger crews who had fought confidently behind their heavy armor learned that American tanks could pose serious frontal threats at combat ranges. American crews who had felt decisively outmatched gained meaningful confidence from knowing they possessed ammunition that could defeat Tigers under favorable circumstances. This shift in tactical psychology, enabled by tungsten carbide ammunition produced in American factories and distributed in small but significant quantities, influenced every subsequent armored engagement of the European war's final months. HVAP ammunition, though never available in desired quantities and constrained by severe tungsten scarcity throughout its production, provided enough improved capability to transform American tank crews from hesitant defenders into confident attackers willing to engage German heavy armor directly rather than defaulting to withdrawal and requests for support. The crews who fired those first HVAP rounds in combat against Tigers, watching tungsten cores punch through armor that had seemed absolutely invincible, demonstrated that industrial capacity and material science applied intelligently to urgent tactical problems could overcome seemingly insurmountable technical disadvantages. This fundamental lesson, learned at considerable cost on frozen Belgian battlefields and across European combat zones, remains directly relevant for military planners facing technological challenges of modern warfare. The Tiger tank entered combat in August 1942 as the most formidable armored vehicle in the world, seemingly immune to Allied anti-tank weapons. By December 1944, American tungsten carbide ammunition had transformed the tactical equation, giving Sherman crews the capability to destroy Tigers frontally at combat ranges. The psychological impact of this transformation, the shattering of German confidence in armor invulnerability, contributed substantially to the collapse of German armored resistance in the war's final months. Tigers that had once advanced boldly now fought cautiously, their crews uncertain whether approaching Shermans carried the devastating HVAP rounds that could kill them. The story of HVAP ammunition demonstrates war's fundamental reality that technological advantages are temporary while industrial capacity and resource access provide enduring strategic advantages. Germany's Tigers represented technical excellence in armor and firepower but required resources Germany couldn't sustain. America's HVAP represented adequate technical sophistication produced in quantities sufficient to affect battlefield outcomes. The combination proved strategically decisive. Modern military planners studying this history recognize that weapon system effectiveness depends not just on technical performance, but on industrial capacity to produce adequate quantities, logistical capability to deliver weapons to troops who need them, and training infrastructure to ensure effective employment. HVAP succeeded not because it made Shermans equal to Tigers in technical specifications, but because it gave American crews confidence and capability while shattering German psychological advantages. In that transformation lay a victory that transcended individual engagements and kill ratios. The hunters had become uncertain, the hunted had gained hope, and the psychological balance that determines tactical aggressiveness shifted decisively in American favor during the war's final crucial months. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.